Aaron Sorkin was interviewing different directors to do that show. And there were a number of people that came in thinking that this was going to be just your basic sitcom. And Aaron never saw it that way. And I think it was Tommy that realized this was something so unique and different that the two of them hit it off incredibly well. And I always say that I think Tommy visualizes Aaron's words, and it's just this perfect match of a writer and a director. And it's just one person gets the words and the other person gets the visuals, and it's a match made in heaven. Yeah. And so that show was just meant to be for the two of them.
Yeah. And so what do you think about your editing made Tommy, was he the reason that you went to Sports Night specifically?
Yeah. I think probably it was just the energy and the snappiness of what I was trying to do on Seinfeld, because he really liked the very quick cuts and all of that. And I remember when we were even doing the show, we shot it in 16, and a lot of it was because you just didn't have the room. Well, you didn't have this technology, but you didn't have the room for bigger cameras or anything like that. And some of the operators would say, I can't imagine why we're shooting all of this. You're never going to use it. And I thought, yes, I will. And when they saw the show aired, they realized that every little piece was some part of the greater picture. And I think they all just started appreciating that all the work they were doing was really adding up to something really big.
How did the cast and everyone get along?
I think everybody got along brilliantly on that show. And I think that it really started off with Aaron and Tommy. And I think one of the things about that show that was maybe even just slightly different from working on Seinfeld was when you were working on Sports Night, you really felt like you were playing on a team. And I remember when we got nominated for an Emmy, it was different. It wasn't like you were just winning for yourself, you were just winning for the whole show. And there was just an atmosphere, I think, that Aaron had set up and Tommy set up, where you really felt like you were part of just a bigger picture, and you really always felt it as if you were just completely incorporated in that bigger picture.
And Aaron Sorkin, what was it like working with him? How closely did you work with him?
Well, his room was just across the hallway from me, so I worked very closely. And a lot of times, because this was also his first TV show, he would just come in my room and just flop down on the sofa and say, okay, show me something. And that's literally how we would do editing, where sometimes I would show him stuff even before maybe a director had seen something, because it was something really fun that I wanted him to look at. But there was a really good rapport where a lot of times, like I said earlier, I would go in his room and ask him to, read some dialogue so I would understand the rhythm of what it was that he was trying to accomplish. And he was very much a wordsmith. If you said the, that was very different from ah. And so he was very, very particular about the words that were used, because I think it all just added up to something much bigger for him. So you had to be very, very honest about that. And I think one of the other things that we did was we had one scene where two characters were having a fight. And the director had done it 5 different takes. And each take was starting off with just the fight as the dialogue and progressively getting more and more angry and really playing the scene for all the anger and just all the emotion and just the gestures and all of that. And I asked Aaron, I said, they're all very interesting. Which one is the one that you want? And he said, the word should be the anger. And I think that was very much about Aaron, was the word should really be the story. I think another thing that he did one time that was really extraordinary was Jeremy, the character, was telling Natalie, the character, a story about how his father had had this 20-year affair and his mom had never known. And Aaron just said, try cutting the scene so neither of them ever lose eye contact. I was like, wow, that just changed the whole dynamic, because there was this level of honesty. And you think to yourself, when somebody says it, you think, why didn't I think of that? Because it's just almost so obvious. But when you think about it, so much about television really is in the eyes. You rarely are using big wide shots. You might use it for geography or whatever, but a lot of actors are not acting with their whole body. They're really acting all right here. And you really hope that they pay attention to that whole notion of, keep looking at somebody. If you don't, there's got to be a reason, and really just paying attention to things like that. It really just affects, I think, a lot of times the way that I cut, especially in drama.
Now, Sports Night became known for its like rapid fire dialogue and
Right.
the walk and talk thing.
Right.
What was the walk and talk, and how did it develop?
I think the walk and talk was a lot of times we didn't want to just have exposition of two people just sitting at a desk. And I think having that walk and talk added a whole notion of just the urgency of that environment where people don't stop. They're trying to always be doing more than one thing at a time. So I think it developed out of necessity too.
What were the specific challenges of editing a show with that kind of thing?
Well, I think the one big thing on that show was I thought we had a lot of footage on Seinfeld. We literally shot twice as much on Sports Night. So I think just the management of the amount of film that you would get at any given time was just extraordinary, because every time you had somebody at an anchor desk, you also had them on a monitor, and you also had them in the control room. So you literally, for everything, you probably had 3 times as much footage. So you're always dealing with that and just trying to come up with what is the rhythm and what's the the storytelling notion that you're going to have there. So it was, I think that just the volume of footage was the biggest challenge.
Can you talk about the day that Robert Guillaume had a stroke?
Yeah, he was late for the set, and they sent one of the PAs to his room, and that's where they found him. And the PA called Tommy, and Tommy had the presence of mind not to call an ambulance or anything like that, because he didn't want a whole big to-do of, press or anything like that. And it was so easy because we were right across the street from St. Joe's to just take him over there. And now my editing room was right next to Erin's. And I remember Tommy coming up and talking to Erin, and their immediate reaction to the whole thing was, well, when Robert comes back, we'll do a big episode of him returning after his stroke. They never for a moment thought, well, we'll have to write him out or anything like that. It was from day one always planned for his return. And I think there was always that sense of looking forward to seeing him come back, and everybody just, that episode where he returns, I think it was just everybody just being so thrilled to death that he made it back. So it was...
What impact did his absence have on the show? Did you...
Well, I think everybody missed him, and I think that writing-wise it was certainly a challenge because he was such an important character in the show. So it was a loss, but I think it was one that we had always, planned for the return. So that was, I think it made it even sweeter when he came back.
Yeah.
So.
How did you feel when Sports Night was canceled?
Devastated, really. I think that of all the things that I did, and I know we spent a lot of time talking about Seinfeld and all of that, but I think Sports Night to me was absolutely my favorite show that I worked on. And I think a lot of it was because it was such a huge challenge. I think that I saw Erin as like my second genius and Tommy as my third, but I think it was just working in an environment where you were right there all the time, and the set, you could always just be on the set at a moment's notice. And there was something story-wise that I think I really connected with a lot of those stories and just really loved them. And that also from day one, you were the person that was really helping create those characters. And I think that as an editor, when you're sitting in that room, you really have a good idea of who you want your characters to be and what they're going to do. I think a great case in point was Felicity Huffman. At one point, her character is breaking up with the Peter Krause character. And Felicity is brilliant at being able to cry. I don't know what place she goes to, but she can just cry that fast. And she actually was crying, and I thought, no, and her character's name was Dana, and I thought, my Dana wouldn't cry in front of anybody. She would cry in private. And so I decided she should just get to that edge of tears. And then I realized, you know what? You make everybody at home cry, not the actors cry. And there's something much more powerful in that. And I think that was one of those editing things that I made that decision that I want to make the audience cry, not the character. And that to me was also just like one of my little things that I would do. But I think being with the show from the very beginning, you get to know all those little gestures that those different people will do, and you can really, it's almost like the writer is molding the words and you're molding the gestures.